enter your data for the wheel and axle lab into Logger Pro and make the graphs that we've made in class, namely a position time graph, a position time squared graph, and a velocity time graph. Logger Pro is a nice program. It allows us in lab to collect our data using various probes and also to easily manipulate that data and make graphs. First thing you're going to notice when you open up Logger Pro is that it shows a data set, a generic data set, and a graph for you. What you want to do though is delete this graph. So I'm going to click on the graph and hit delete on the keyboard, and that will delete the graph. I'm going to take the data table, click on the data table, and these little grab handles for resizing, I'm just going to make the data table really big. Okay, we want to put in our clock reading and position data for the wheel, and so I'm going to click here on the X. If I double click, then my x-axis value is going to be clock reading. For my short name, I'm going to use a little t, and my units in this lab were beats. One of the cool things we can do is, since this was our independent variable and we know what the values were, I can click this box that says generate values. Click numeric values starting from 0 going to 30, and go by an increment of 1 and hit done, and that will fill out this column for me. Then I can do the same thing, I can double click on this Y. This will be my position. My short name for position is X. There's no way to make that little arrow on top for the vector symbol, so just X is fine. The units for this were centimeters. And I can't generate the values for this, so I'm going to have to type them in manually because this is my dependent variable. So I'm just going to type this in. You can either go grab something to eat or scroll ahead until I'm done. Oops. Okay, so now I've got my position and time data in, and the first column we're going to make, you did this in Sheets before, we're going to make a time squared column. So in Logger Pro, it's not quite as powerful as Sheets. You need to do all your calculations for the entire column, so there's no clicking on individual cells and making some fancy complicated things. So you're a little bit limited in that sense, but there are some pretty neat features that let you do the things we need to do anyway. You just have to kind of learn how to work around these problems of not having a full-fledged spreadsheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to make new columns, and these are called calculated columns. There are two kinds of columns. What we've just used are called manual columns, where you type the data in yourself. With a new calculated column, you're actually going to have a formula that's used to calculate the values that go into that column. So the first one I'm going to use is time squared, so I'm going to change this to time squared. My symbol is going to be T, and you can superscript a 2 on there. Okay. And my units will be beats squared. So beats superscript 2. And then down here is where we put our expression. Notice in sheets you use an equation, so there's an equal sign and then some various things. Here is an expression, so I just want to take the column for the clock reading, and I want to square it. So I'm going to type Shift 6 to get the caret 2, and that should make a column for the beat squared. Yes. If I double click on this, by the way, if I don't like all those decimal places, if I click on options, I can change the number of decimal places that I have for this. Something like that. My next calculated column, you're going to have one for displacement. And that is delta x. So if I come here, delta is a Greek uppercase letter, so I can hit delta x. The units will be centimeters. And the expression, now what I need to do is choose a function called delta. So this is something that Logger Pro has specifically for the purpose of making this column for us. The delta function will take this value and subtract from this value the value above it. Okay, so I'm going to take the delta of the position column, and when I type this, there you go. And again, if I double click here, I can change, I can change the colors, and I can change the number of decimal places that I have. The next column that I make is going to be the time interval, or the elapsed time. That has the name, or the short name, delta t. And the units will be beats. And again, I choose the function delta, and then I choose which column I would like to perform that function on, and I'm going to use the clock reading. And there we go. Again, I'll double click there, change the number of decimal places. And here we go. And now I'm ready for the two columns that I need. I need a velocity column and a middle time column. So to calculate velocity, I'm just going to take this column and divide it by this column. I can do that easily, again, using new calculated column. This is my velocity. V. Again, you can't put the bars and the arrows on it, so the short name doesn't look quite right. And the units are going to be centimeters per beat. And the expression for this one is going to be two variables. I'm going to take the displacement column and divide it by the time interval column. And hit done. And again, if I click on the options, I suppose you probably should do this before closing the box. I've only done that, 4 out of 4 times now. And the last thing is the middle time. In Sheets, making middle time was pretty easy because you could take the average of the 2 times, but in Logger Pro you can't really do that. And so you have to kind of trick Logger Pro into doing it. If you take a look at what's going to happen here, my middle time column is going to come in here. And what I want is halfway between 0 and 1. So the way to do this is you can't tell it to take this specific cell and add it to this specific cell and divide by 2. So what I want to do is take this specific cell and subtract half of how I got there. And how I got there is this delta t column. So my formula for the middle time is going to be the time column minus half of the delta time, or the clock reading minus half of the time interval. Clock reading minus half. I'm going to use 0.5. You could use 1/2 if you want to, but you have to understand Logger Pro will not, if I just went ahead and picked the clock reading here, I'm sorry, the time interval here, it would give me a funny error. Okay, if you get that error while parsing, that just means you typed the equation wrong. So you're missing a parentheses or a quote or something. In this case, what I'm missing is the multiplication symbol. So if you have a fancy graphing calculator, you can do this and get away with it because the calculator knows that you're trying to multiply these two things. But in Logger Pro, you have to explicitly put that asterisk in there for the multiplication. And then we look, and hopefully, yes. So this, helps if you name it. Here's my middle time, T-mid. And unfortunately, Logger Pro is limited in what I can subscript, right? I can subscript numbers, but I can't subscript a word mid. So that's okay if it says T-mid. And let's go ahead and fix the decimal places right now. There we go. And just make sure that this 0.5, which goes with this velocity, is halfway from 0 to 1. Okay, and I know on Sheets it was kind of neat because you could format it so that this actually came out between these two, but in LoggerPro there's no way to do that. So you can see what happens is you just skip this top square here, the top row. All right, and that's how you graph your data. Let's save really quick, because if you don't save and LoggerPro crashes, then you're going to do a lot of weeping. Okay, now you've got another data set to make. So what you can do here is you can go to new data set. And the cool thing is, if you've made this one already, the other one will come out with all the columns made the way that you want it, and you can just type in your new data in there.